Culture is this feedback process. If I have an idea, I can make a piece of media. And I can put that into the world, and now other people can see it, and they can feed back off of it. That's how you make culture. Culture requires thoughts to be turned into media so that other people can ingest thoughts and have more thoughts and create more media. That's what culture is. It's a process. It's a feedback process that's distributed among an entire population. A demonstration is the initiation of new kind of thought. It's the initiation of new kind of language. It's fundamentally necessary for any kind of cultural shift to first demonstrate that something is necessary. And I mean demonstrate in the most literal sense of the word. If I wanted to change something right here and right now, I would have to take that thought and I would have to make it manifest. I could either write it down and I could hand a piece of paper to you, or I could speak and media would come flying out of my mouth. But either way, one of those two things has to happen in order for anything to change, in order for some cultural movement to move forward, even if it's just me saying, hey, let's go hang out and talk about this a little bit more. All of a sudden, now there's a culture. Now there's a precedent for you and I to interact in some different way. There's something different about the world now. And that has to be demonstrated in order for it to actually be enacted. So protests are just generalized, or rather specific instances of speaking. And speaking is necessary for culture.
So why the Capitol building? You said you could just speak anywhere. It'd be the same thing.
We're here. We're here. Why the Capitol building? Because that's a place where problems are literally written into law. It seems to make sense. Now, that's not the only place that we have problems, but that's a public property. If we had a problem with the bank, if we had a problem with a weapons manufacturer, and we went and stood on their doorstep, we could get arrested. So there's a pragmatic answer, there's also a fundamentally theoretical answer.
Also, our vigil tonight isn't at the Capitol.
Isn't at the Capitol.
We aren't going to do things at other places. Lake Ella?
There's a vigil tonight. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Tonight. 8 p.m.
8 p.m.
There will be
a
vigil.
And
a march.
In
solidarity with Scott Olsen. And Occupy Oakland.
And
more generally, everyone in the world. Lake Ella, did I say that?
No.
Oh, at Lake Ella.
8 p.m.
PM.
I got a question. You implied that people who stayed back home, who stayed in this small town, these families, you implied that they were learning and that they were living there as well. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, I mean, really quickly.
Some people are content with staying there in certain families.
Definitely.
And you're implying that their philosophy is wrong.
Well, first of all, you're inferring. And there's a subtle difference between me implying and you inferring. I never suggested that they did it out of philosophy. I never suggested...
Educated.
Sorry?
You suggested that they weren't educated of the world and therefore they're wrong.
No, I just know people who aren't educated that are stuck in those situations. But I also know that it's completely possible and totally legitimate to be made happy in situations that somehow don't seem from the outside extraordinary. Every human experience is fundamentally extraordinary, and I deeply apologize if I came off as suggesting that just because someone lives in a small town or works a shitty job and just has a family and has kids and that's it, I in no way meant to imply that somehow that's any less legitimate than any other thing that could take place on the face of the earth. Because every single human life is absolutely legitimate and absolutely profound and extraordinary. So let me be clear about that. I apologize if I came off in that way in any sense. It's not at all what I meant.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
what is the primary basis of your argument? I don't know if you can re-explain it. Like, what is the primary basis of the everything you were just saying about like you were saying that people are not cultural and they're lacking.
Yeah, please.
Please, come on up.
Go on the rock.
I'm gonna go on this rock.
Go on the rock.
That's not my rock.
It's a soap rock.
okay.
Anybody can
You
stand
can
that.
tell us what you're talking about, so we can reply back.
I'm just wondering, like, what's the basis of your argument saying that people are, like, you're saying like people are like culturally bereft and they don't have like this broader aspect because corporations are stealing that from them by creating like false media or like a false like a illusion of some sort. That's like my primary question. I'm not attacking the person or attacking their movement. I just wanted to be confused about that.
Wait, so what's the question then?
Like you're,
Is
like the whole you introduced the culture aspect, and I was really confused. Like, how is culture have to influence anything like your Occupy Tallahassee? Like, what were you meaning by culture?
That the movement itself, that any movement, is the fundamental emergence of new culture.
So what's so primarily wrong with old culture? Like, what's wrong with this culture today? If you're implying that there actually a new culture, what's wrong with this culture?
Okay.
Let's say United States culture.
Sure. Well, I would first, somewhat divisively, but I'll return to something genuine, ask, does everyone here feel like this culture is serving all of us in a just manner? Good one. That's good. Okay, cool. I feel like, and a lot of people feel fundamentally disenfranchised by the institutions that this culture has created for us. There are institutionalized injustices and inequalities. But even if you're fine with that, culture is an evolutionary system, and at no point should it stop because its environment is constantly changing, and you need to evolve in order to stay fundamentally adapted. So I would say that new culture is always necessary, and that we should never, ever, no culture at any point in history will ever suffice. Ever.
I suppose you're implying that this culture is dead end and that it has no else place to go. It's reached the end of its life. It has nowhere else to go, so you have to create a new culture.
No, I think that culture and humanity is a single evolutionary process, and that instead of stopping, it should just continue to move forward. Nothing's dying. Nothing is having to be made anew. We just have to keep moving forward.
How do you propose that the culture, say, in like just whatever town in Mississippi or Alabama or whatever? I'm from a very small town in Mississippi, so I can somewhat relate. But say like bumfuck Mississippi and their cultural is like stagnant. How are you proposing, in your personal views, that culture evolves and adapts to however you view it should be now?
Community involvement.
What do you think should be done to make that culture evolve to the way that you want it to be?
Culture is a mechanism of people.
Yeah, please. That's what we're here for.
Step down.
When you're measuring culture, you can't measure it absent of people or the environment. That's necessary. It's a necessary component of culture. So, sorry, your question one more time? Like, how do you propose?
He's saying, answering his question by saying that culture never stops evolving, but right now in like certain places it's become like, say, stagnant, and the culture kind of stopped evolving, and what they're pushing for is an evolution in culture so that people will be maybe more empowered to get an education, or more empowered to not stay wherever, but they need to get out. Like, what is the proposal here to make that cultural evolution?
Okay, well, the empowerment, the sense of empowerment and the sense of control of everyone's life is definitely key to that. Also, like, educating these people, the methods that they can take control of their lives is also very paramount, but these people can't implement these measures without the economic or social resources.
So what are you proposing happens?
We redistribute wealth. I'm serious about that. Like, the 1% has so much goddamn money, and they're sucking it out of the consumer basis and then sitting on it. Like, it doesn't go anywhere. Once it comes out of the people, it becomes their money, and they don't.
Can I ask a really stupid question?
Yeah.
What is money?
Okay, so money can be looked at by, like, I guess really
Is money
any
not
sort
just
of economic
resources?
capital. Yeah, sure.
So, for instance, how I make my living, for instance, is I actually disseminate information to students. Okay. Now, the way I make my capital is I take information and I give it to all you people.
Yes.
Now, if that information is free to you, how am I going to make a living?
If that information is
put in like a book or something online, how do I sustain myself for a living? You see that there's a problem that sort of goes on here that most people have. That I mean, how many of you guys think that like a corporation is evil? You guys think that corporations are just inherently evil and that they're out to kill us, or banks, or schools? Because I've heard a lot about this with this Occupy movement, that people seem to think that schools or businesses are somehow evil. They are not. Like, these people are actually out to help you. What's wrong is that people just don't give a shit anymore, okay? Now, what this Occupy movement is really about is people are trying to say, hey, listen to us, all right? And you know what? I agree with you. What you should do is you should go out and fucking vote. How many of you guys actually voted in the last election that occurred in town, in your last hometown? I don't know. I really don't know.
maybe 37% of us.
Yeah, not very many.
Yeah.
But I teach a lot of students, and I can tell you that there's a number of students that will come into class and they will say, hey, I don't understand this. Well, I can tell you it's because they weren't there the day before or they weren't there the next day. Okay? It's becoming not involved and it's becoming ill-informed. Okay? The thing to do is not just to listen to these people that come up and say whatever they want to say. What you have to do is you have to make your own opinion, find your own voice, and make yourself heard. Okay? You need to find things that you agree with and coalesce with those other people and work towards common goals and interests.
Right. And the
no matter what it is.
The common goal of this group seems to be pushing to get people to understand that social.
But it's I don't think that there's a problem with rural Mississippi staying rural Mississippi. There's not a problem with people staying as they are as long as they're happy with it. We shouldn't march into rural Mississippi and say, here's schools for you guys, because that sounds a lot like something that we did in another country. And that's not good. What we want to do, or I think what I would like to do, at least me as a person, is tell people that you can do whatever it is that you want to do. All you have to have is the courage to stand up and do it. And maybe that's really naive of me, but maybe I'm a really naive person.
That's why we're here. We're standing up for what we
Exactly. I mean, so you guys are standing up for what you believe in, and a lot of people are asking the question, what do you believe in? And you're saying, well, I mean, we just believe in something. So, I mean, a lot of people are asking the right question, like, what do you believe in? But the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that it's really just a mutual dissatisfaction with how things are going, and that the problem is not just government, it's not just corporations, it's not just universities, it's the whole fucking thing. It's the way the society works. And it actually does not start with the corporations or the universities or the government. The problem actually starts with you and the person sitting next to you. And it starts with just your complacence with the system. So when you're out there, so if you go out there and you make a sign, make your sign for what you want to make your sign for. It doesn't have to say that we are the 99%. You can say that you are the 1%, because I am. In my classroom, I am the 1%. I am the 1% that holds all the information of my students. Now, does that make me an evil person? No. It just means that, I am the source of power. I am this, and that's the thing. What you have to understand is that you as a society has to stand up and ask for these resources to be given to you. And that's what the movement's all about. Standing up and asking for resources to be given to you, whether they be economic, whether they be educational, or whether they be political. Ask for your rights back. Ask for your money back. Ask for your education back. That's what the movement's about.
Rock! Why are you so empty?
Just an idea, though. I think it has a lot to do with social responsibility in fiscal policy. Do a lot of people feel, I'm not going to be up here talking for a while. Just the fact that like legitimate ethics. Okay, so we're not all going to agree on what legitimate ethics are, but we are going to agree maybe in the idea of keeping humanity's best interests in mind. That's also maybe kind of a lucid concept, but
No.
it just seems that responsible ethics have completely evaporated from the fiscal environment. That when you're looking at most of these companies that just happen to have too much money, they might have gotten there because they are so damn greedy, and that they didn't decide to do the socially responsible thing by investing their capital in, instead of venture capitalism, maybe investing their resources in local communities, which are obviously much better.
But I don't know. My problem with that is that who are you or me or anyone else to tell anyone else what they should do with their money if they want to do it? They earned it in an honest way. Why can't they spend it however they want, whether it's keeping it to themselves or just giving it to community service or whatever? Why are you or this movement so have the authority? Why do you have the authority to do it?
Quick answer. I worked at a small machine shop in Tampa. Part of the problem was more people were getting educated, and that was good, but they didn't want to work in a machine shop anymore. And so the owner couldn't find good new employees. You know, there was just kind of, put it, bluntly, just what was left over. And they weren't necessarily motivated or wanted to learn. Because a lot of the better, or I shouldn't say better, some of the more motivated people who wanted to learn, they went on to college. What he did is he sponsored apprenticeships. And there was a school where high schoolers could go to learn how to be a machinist or just any trade. And they had a head start coming into this job, so the company wasn't totally dependent upon training them themselves. So by investing in that, he saved himself money by, other companies were pulling together resources for these programs. So we didn't have to train them, and they weren't completely ignorant to the job walking in. And he made more money by having better employees, less scrap, less machines crashing together. So there's a reinvestment that businesses can do, and maybe to their benefit to do. So it's just not a good thing, it's a practical thing, and it's a moneymaker, which is what businesses do. So
there's a difference between arguing the physical feasibility and the ethics of it. On one hand, you said they should change because of the ethics, and it's maybe feasible, but obviously what they are doing is working. That's why you're upset. How can you tell them that they should change that when the system really encourages that sort of behavior? I mean, he did it because it worked for him. Whatever the big corporations do, they do because it works for them. I mean, how do we expect to change something of that scale? Because those are two different arguments. One is why, the other is potentially why it's not a bad idea to change.
I mean, to get directly at your question, I think you were asking, who are we to tell anything to anyone about how they can spend the money that they make? I think there are some definite ways that we can do this. Say I have a product and I sell it all to you, and I make a lot of money. And in doing so, I realize I really like making money. And I really want to make as much of it as possible. So, wherever it was down the street that I was getting my products made, maybe that costs a little bit too much. And in fact, maybe I made enough money that I can actually relocate my facilities to a place where people don't really have guaranteed human rights. And I can actually exploit those people for more profit. So I'm using my money to exploit humanity. Now, I think that you all absolutely have a say in how I spend my money if I'm violating human rights.
You're talking about sweatshops or something like that?
Talking about all kinds of stuff.
Right, okay. I just gave a speech about anti-sweatshop movements and why they're bad, so this kind of has it's kind of a time. But,
You have a speech then?
no, I don't have it memorized.
Well, you got something to say.
I don't have it memorized.
This is a soapbox. Come on,
Yes,
come on,
this
come
is
on,
where
come on,
we
come on.
are.
It's like a small statement.
It's okay.
Okay. Well, just to hit on the topic of exploiting people abroad or whatever, you're not exploiting them if they're choosing to work in these jobs. You're actually, I mean, okay, take Cambodia, right? A lot of stuff is made in Cambodia by Nike or Old Navy or whatever. Why? I mean, the people who are working in that factory, are people forcing them to work in the factory, or is that the best option that they have, so they go to that factory? You know. So I mean, I don't really think like offshoring is an issue. I don't. I think corporations, if it's cheaper for them to go abroad happily. The product will be cheaper for us as consumers, and you'll be making those people are better off abroad. So I do about efficiency and what you were saying, how he was making inefficient decisions by not, you went on the whole thing. I do agree. Maybe changes can be made in corporations to be more efficient, and maybe that entails hiring more people. Maybe some things need to be changed, but I mean, if it's working, if something's not broken, why are you going to fix it? If you're making millions of dollars, keep making millions of dollars. You're working, and if you're doing it honestly. If you're doing it honestly and not, you're not hurting anyone and you're not hurting yourself.
Isn't that the question in itself? Is it done honestly, and is it harming anybody, or what is the aspect or the concept of harming somebody, and what is their rights as a human being?
Right. Well, we could talk about that for ages, but
let's.
We must. Yeah,
we
why
have
not?
to.
It has to come down to everything has to be disseminated down to a general point. Like that's the whole point of a logical discussion. It has to come down to one single point or aspect. So that, like, what are corporations around for? Are they around to make people happy, or are they around to make money? Or are they interested in other people, or are they interested within themselves? So that's the questions I keep on asking myself when these points are brought up. If I am the CEO of a corporation and I have my board, and my job is to run that corporation, my interests are not in the interests of the world or the United States. My interest is in the interest of my company or my corporation. So how do we as the people, how do we reach out and touch them? Like, how do we make the connection that our interests are being in violation because of what they're doing? And I think the only way, and the guy who was up here earlier, he made a good point about that, is that you have to reach out within your government and say, they're monopolizing, they're taking advantage of us, they're hoarding money, and then using that to their advantage. Now, I think the only way that you can successfully do that is if you have to change the political system. Whether you change it by voting, or you totally just overthrow the system completely, saying this is illegitimate, this is wrong. So I don't think a group of people can single-handedly attack a corporation. I think they have to start at the base and then start at the political system, then build their way up. Whether it be by voting and moving the political factors around, or by just starting over. So that's kind of my point.
Cool. I just want to take really quick to what you're saying. I definitely see where you're coming from. And, a lot of times if you get a factory built in your third world country, that's great, because now there's jobs. But the idea is a lot of those jobs have terrible working conditions. And now maybe your point would be, well, maybe that's still better than the options that they have. Okay, for instance. But I think there's a lot more going on when that happens. So a lot of times when jobs are sent overseas, it's not just as simple as, I'm going to take a bunch of building materials, I'm going to take them to this third world country and build a factory, and then I'm going to ask people if they want to work there. You have to go through foreign governments. And lots of foreign governments are fundamentally corrupt. And what happens, what allows these institutionalized places for the violation of human rights is by further corruption of these government officials in foreign countries. So just as an example, Chiquita banana. Okay, we could all go to a grocery store right now and buy a banana for cheaper than we can buy an apple. But an apple is grown domestically. Bananas are shipped from another continent. That doesn't make any sense. So why has that come to be the case? Well, there was actually people who sought specifically to make the banana cheaper than the apple because it was exotic and there was a massive market for it. And they knew that they could really make a lot of money here. So United Fruit, or what's now become called Chiquita Banana, specifically set up shop outside of the borders of the United States, in a lot of different places, South and Central America. I'm going to be talking specifically about Colombia. They set up shop in Colombia, and they knew that they could exploit people and reduce their costs so that they could literally make the banana cheaper than the apple. So that they could grow a fruit, ship it to another continent, and still deliver it for cheaper than a fruit that grew there by itself. So the way that that happened is because they were bribing the Colombian government to allow them to continue their inhumane practices on the Colombian people. And whenever the Colombian people got fed up and quit, which is totally their right, there were so many people in destitution there that they didn't have a choice but to step in and fill those jobs. But then they were being treated inhumanely. And whenever they tried to organize, they were murdered. Whenever people tried to stand up for their human rights, they were murdered. Coca-Cola murders people on other continents for trying to unionize, for trying to stand up for their fundamental human rights. Coca-Cola murders people. Now what happened when this fungus killed the banana that our grandparents ate? The bananas that we eat today are not the bananas that our grandparents ate. Those bananas were way better. And they were also way easier to ship. They were a lot more robust. So there was a massive fungus that wiped out the entirety of that banana. And so Chiquita was put in this bind because it cost more for them to ship these more fragile bananas. So they had to cut costs even less. They cut costs and reduced the working conditions so poorly that the Colombian government, who was fundamentally corrupt, finally had to say, like, we can't let you do that to our people. We have to say no. So what happened? United Fruit, Chiquita Banana, and the CIA overthrow the Colombian government. And ever since that overthrow, there has been a three-way civil war in Colombia because they fundamentally destabilized the country for the sake of committing atrocities against human rights, creating an institutionalization of the refusal of people to have actual sustainable, healthy working conditions and to not be exploited. A corrupt government actually stepped up and said, hey, kind of stop that. And they got thrown out. And people were murdered. So it's not just you set up shop and it's an opportunity. There are fundamentally destructive things. Governments are being corrupt. People are being murdered to keep those opportunities in place. And they're not great opportunities in and of themselves. So there's a huge, broad picture that come along with making a job in another country. And it's not pretty.
That example was like 80 years ago. It changed in over 80 years.
Has it?
Well, actually my family's Colombian, so yes, it has changed some. There are still issues in that country, but not the way you described it.
What about other corporations? Coca-Cola is actively murdering unionizing workers. Oh, sure.
Bringing up two different events.
Right. That was a long time ago. Granted. Now the question is that practice still happening? Because that's what you're saying. Government can change. Has it changed? I would say no. Coca-Cola is currently murdering unionizing workers.
We're talking about Colombia, not Coca-Cola.
Okay.
I think his point is that maybe the Colombian issue has been solved or being resolved, but the issue just has moved to a new country. It's still.
Do you personally drink Coke?
No. Fuck no. And I don't buy Chiquita bananas either.
So you're against corporations like the clothing companies that make clothes in third world countries that exploit labor?
Yeah, they're really unfortunate.
What country was that shirt made in that has Occupy Tallahassee printed on it?
This is an organic t-shirt.
This is an organic t-shirt. It was made somewhere. I didn't buy it.
Check your tag.
I didn't buy it, and I can tell you that if I bought a piece of clothing brand new, which I do not do, then I absolutely do not buy it from. This was made in Honduras. Ooh, I wonder what the conditions were there.
Probably not very good either.
But as a consumer, I didn't put my money there. This shirt was handed to me, literally. These pants, my mother bought for me.
But they were still made at the hand.
I think that what you're getting at is the fundamental issue of consumerism, right? Like, how can we stand here and talk about the evils of corporations and yet, in our daily lives, pay into those corporations? We do that, right?
Whether or not you paid for it yourself, it was paid for and at the cost of someone else's human rights and labor.
Right. Okay. Well, let's just.
Like small stuff. What do you think would be? What do you think would change that? Instead of just being like, you did this and like trying to find like a.
I'm not trying trying to personally attack him,
But you did.
If he's so against it, why not find alternatives himself?
Well, that's the point. That's the point.
I'm
is
a
that-
vegan.
That's
I don't
the
drink Coca-Cola. I don't try chia meds. Come at me. Like, I want to tell me what I'm doing wrong still.
That's the point. I think that the point is that we have a cultural and commodity situation set up that encourages us that masks our participation in those violent structures and practices that occur across the world and here at home. So I think that the question posed is an absolutely valid question. That if we are going to sit here and pretend that we're progressive and civilized and liberal and democratic, then what do we need to do in order to live up to the very values that we hold dear? What do we need to do in order to achieve the vision that we want to see in the world? And part of that means, yes, where do you spend your money? Not buying Chiquita bananas, not buying clothes that are produced in sweatshops, reusing space, buying used things, trading things with people, rather than paying in to industrial systems that give a shit about you and me and the world that sustains us. So I think that's a fruitful question, and we should all get on board with it. Let's think about it. Yeah, raise your hand from over there, Denny.
Hey. I'm good. Very well. Where are you?
Because the reason I ask that is the majority
Okay. I think you should come out here. It's still going on. Probably 25 people on and off. There's been a lot more. But just, people left.
So the question is about what exactly
It's kinda really.
And I would actually sort of sidestep
People are
just a
firing
bit
back at
and say that
the
it
people
doesn't matter
talking,
what
so
the
it's been
corporation
back and
wants
forth.
not. The point is,
Because in the beginning it was just a lot of people just talking to people. Now it's
collections
going
of
back and
people
forth.
are able to recklessly profiteer. They are able, and they are abetted by our government and by our cultural practices. They are enabled.
You should bring your laptop over here and work on it.
Violently, people in the world and the environment of the world, and all
Okay.
in the name of profit for
All
a
right.
few. So the problem isn't with corporations in general. The problem isn't
All right,
with
hello.
people who want to get together and make some shit
I love
happen.
you too.
That's all fine and good. The
Bye.
question is, what does their activity have to do with the world around them? It was brought up earlier that we're talking about rights and it's our right to do what we want with our money. But let's go back to like Constitutional Development 101 or whatever they call that here, right? What is the conditions for your freedom of speech? Anybody? Where does your freedom of speech stop by law? When you endanger someone around you. You cannot yell fire in a crowded movie theater when there is no fire. You cannot willingly subject people to violence through the exercise of your free right. So the question is, are we going to give corporations the power to be persons and lobby at will while not holding them accountable to the same caveats that our freedoms are limited by? I say hell no. Hell no.
I have a question. I guess it's a question. I don't know how I'm gonna say it yet. Okay, so going back to your Chiquita banana example, I think, and in that example, by the way, there's like a phone here.
Yeah, it's recording.
Oh, okay. I think that in your example, maybe the core issue is not the corporations, although they don't help, but maybe it's just the corrupt government that exists around the world. And I think that's too great of an issue for us as American civilians to solve. We can like really tell other governments what to do all the time, or at least not all of them. And I think that as long as corrupt governments exist, and I think that as long as we're all human beings, they will exist. Maybe this isn't going to stop. Maybe as long as there's a corrupt government offering cheaper labor under worse conditions, companies are going to go there.
Should we be happy with that?
As Americans,
The question though
I mean,
is,
it's gonna be cheaper for me to buy a T-shirt, so I'm happy with that.
Are you though? Are you happy?
Yeah,
Are you happy if you know that people were exploited for your shirt? Does that really make you happy?
People were murdered.
I
make
still
that
There's a possibility that there could be a change. Like you're saying that the countries have corrupt governments, and then that's why U.S. companies are going there to make it cheaper. But as U.S. companies, we know does that make it acceptable that we're going there and we're exploiting them? Like, are we supposed to have morale? We can't do it here. Like, I think that we have these type of we have regulations in our country. Shouldn't we try to better the world instead of those type of regulations? Can we go to a different country and create a company?
and half the problems that we're talking about with the Occupy movement is inequality that has developed out of globalization. America has become more unequal due to globalization. Money, like multinational corporations, are becoming richer because they can go overseas to make money, and that's like sweatshops in general aren't going to stop just because of human rights like violations and stuff. It's a matter of the principle that corporations are not going to sacrifice their profits for humanity in a sense, and like we have to, and it does have to start from the bottom and go up, and we do have to find ways, but it is through the American like initiative, like the Western philosophy is being spread out, but where are we to impose on people, like on other countries when they're in a developing situation? They're developing, you know what I'm saying? Like their GDPs are growing at an extensive rate because we're there and we have these jobs in there. So it's kind of like a balance. They're dependent on our multinational corporations to develop, and they're not going to want to sacrifice their development for human rights. And that's why we have institutions set up by Bretton Woods and the UN to try to monitor these things, but they're not working. And like we have to figure out a way. Like Bretton Woods, to me, like the IMF and everything kind of hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked. You can see that like across the board. So it's just how, as a global and like in a global community, can we make changes through these global systems, taking like the liberalism like theory into effect? Like, how do we do this across the board and hold people accountable? You know.
I got a practical answer for you. They're called tariffs. And if we don't want this like shitty T-shirt from Cambodia, because now I can't. There's nowhere in America I can get a job making T-shirts because they do it for so cheap. You tell them, if you want to bring your T-shirts into our country, we're going to impose this tax, and they call that a tariff. And we can level the playing field by saying, this is how much tax we're going to put on you, and it's going to make it our own T-shirts made in America more competitive. And we'll say, well, China, who makes all our crap, we're going to tariff everything you want to import until you have certain rights for your employees, like we have. So it'll level the playing field. If they're getting paid $20 an hour to do something, and I'm getting paid $20 an hour, there'll be more incentive for a company to set up shop here, to make stuff here, for us to spend our money back into their, economy and whatnot. They'll keep it here as opposed to bringing in their cheap crap. So tariffs is a practical answer we can do because we can have our own representatives impose such tariffs.
And what if that country, let's say we put tariffs up, which I'm all for. I like, buying American stuff. And let's say China says, okay, since we're putting up tariffs, we're going to sell our products to different countries. That's not going to, putting tariffs up is not going to stop them. They're going to sell to different countries so they can keep on growing.
Yeah, but we still need that product. And a smart, clever American will say, well, they can't get it from China anymore. I have an opportunity to make it here. And people will come, and they will get jobs, and we'll make it here. That's how
it's already happening. Jobs are coming back over there because people over China realize that they are in the shitter and they want more money for their jobs. And they're bringing jobs back over here now. It's happening.
If there's a need for a product, someone will make it. So the whole idea is, they're the ones making it. We probably made it first anyways. So we can make it ourselves, no matter what it is.
But you're looking at really heavy foreign relations implications with tariffs in the sense in China, who we are dependent on.
And they're dependent upon us too, and they know it.
They know it, yeah, but there's
well, I'm not sure that this is actually speaking to her question because, or the idea, you're suggesting that this happens and maybe it's just the problem that corrupt governments exist and maybe somehow that's just this inevitability of humanity. I think that it's an oversimplification to say that this is all happening because of corporations. And I think that's an oversimplification in the exact same way that it's just happening because of government. It's the collusion of these two entities that's creating an institution of inequality and of exploitation. So I would refuse the suggestion that maybe it's just the corrupt governments, because unto themselves, they wouldn't create a corporation and come over and exploit their own people. They could just exploit their own people with guns. They could just do it at home. And that doesn't happen. It's not just governments. It's not just super corporate entities. There is a dynamic between these things that's creating the process that we're seeing. So I don't think it's nearly as simple as that.
but I do think that one opens the opportunity for the other.
And the other opens the opportunity for the one.
Well, okay. Well, the way I'm thinking of it is that if there's an opportunity, because there's an opening for corruption in exploiting people via government, and a company comes in and takes advantage of that, show me the reverse. Show me how corporations can do that.
You're saying that, for instance,
Does that make sense?
okay, say you're a corrupt government, and I'm an opportunistic corporation. And I say, wow, look at how corrupt you are. You know, I bet that I could exploit you somehow. Like, let me see, maybe I should create a company, and let's see, what could I get out of your country? I could maybe get some cheap labor. Okay, I'm gonna make a company that needs labor, and like what? Maybe you have some natural resources too. Do you have water? Like, okay, I need water. Cool. All right, your country is perfect. Your country and your corruption gave me an idea to start a company to come over and exploit you. Like, I don't see that happening. I think that it happens both ways. I think that looking at it from one way is always going to be overly simplistic. I don't think that the existence of corruption creates a motive. That doesn't create a profit motive. Profit motives emerge and then look for opportunities, right? But in the same sense, I mean, countries do know that they have resources. And countries do know that they have people to exploit. And countries know that governments, rather, when they're corrupt, they can make a lot of money from being corrupt. And so I think it necessarily happens both ways.
What is the realistic solution, though? I mean, as a corporation, I have a profit motivation, and you're asking me to put myself beneath competitors, everyone else. How do you fix that? I mean, you said it's an institution, it's a cycle. What is the point you're leading to? How do you stop that?
Talking about it.
Yeah, awareness.
I'm fully aware that what I'm doing is wrong, but I would do it anyway because it's how the system is.
That's not okay.
That's not cool.
It's not cool at all.
That's not cool at all. Yeah.
And you should be held accountable for that.
Are you winning? Are you really winning?
If I can succeed by putting myself ahead of you, but that's morally reprehensible, do I care? Maybe.
Well, right.
But I'm winning.
Okay, that's ultimately the point. Are you really winning, or does it just feel like you're winning for the moment?
Why would I want to put a dampener on me and my potential? Because that way I bring myself to a fair level for everyone else to compete with me. Or I could take this obvious step forward and then be ahead of him.
Right.
Or anybody for that matter.
Look at the credit default swap and like AIG. They totally were banking on that idea, and they were making so much money off of a credit default swap, insurance for derivatives, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the day, they went down and took everybody down with them. And we have to regulate in the sense that...
Exactly. You're tied to all those people that you feel like you're getting ahead of. So it's not a long-term sustainable success.
But then why make it possible if it's such a terrible idea?
The word that he says regulation, I think that's what we're asking.
Sure.
You're
If you want to change the rules by which I can make myself move forward or step behind other people, that way I will not be able to abuse the system in a way that puts me ahead of him unfairly. Otherwise, you're asking me to not do the best that I can.
At the expense of other human beings.
But I will be doing better.
Well, no.
Oh, so you personally are profiting, so that makes it okay, right?
Well,
that
but I'll be doing better. And do I really?
I'm just asking. I'm trying to get a feel
Yes,
how you feel.
I can hear their opinions.
I think there's a fundamental problem with time scale and the use of the word good. Okay? Sure. Because if you feel like if I could rob every single one of you right now without you knowing it, and that if I had that within my power, I might feel like, oh yeah, I could do that. That would get me like a pocket full of money and some watches and things. But if that ruined everyone else's day, and if they knew that I did that, I might have a pocket full of money, but am I better off? I might be better off for this afternoon. If I could outrun every single one of you, I might be better off for the afternoon. But eventually, the fact that I am linked to every single person here, that's going to catch up with me. And so when you say you're doing better, you might be doing better, or it might look like you're doing better in the short term. But if you're bankrupting and corrupting everything around you, that's what better really subsists on. You might have money, but money's meaningless without a social infrastructure to make it valuable. So you doing better may not be sustainable in the way that you even want.
I agree with what you're saying. I think the phrase you're looking for is enlightened self-interest. That I should do what's in my best interest in the long term, because I know it's best interest for everyone to work with me and me to work with them. But I mean, that's an ideal. That's not a practice. I cannot practice enlightened self-interest. I can make decisions. It can guide my activities, but it's not an activity in itself.
What you can do is support ideas that make it so that other people don't have to suffer. You can support, I don't know, taxes for the wealthy. You can support smaller work weeks. You can support a minimum wage, which is going to drive wages up for everybody.
Right,
Probably
so
increase spending, probably help the economy.
Those are like 4 different things. That's what I'm asking. What are the actions that go with these ideas?
Bring it up at the board meeting when you're wealthy.
Well, though that one is I'm working against my profit there. How can I change this system so that way it's not in my best interests to take everyone's money and run? I mean, that would be the way to change it, yes?
So you're asking, how can we change our patterns of interaction as individuals to remedy these things that go on?
Or as governments, what is it you're trying to advocate for in not an ideal, but in an action?
Okay, action, for instance. Well, right now, I think the problem is a lot of our behaviors are defined in terms of refraining. So, again, let me come back to Coca-Cola. We're born into a system that just by default, we learn to consume certain products. We learn that food comes in a box with a particular label on it, right? But the idea is that's an action. But by buying a Coca-Cola, I am actively giving money to people who violate human rights. Now, as far as an action is concerned, like that's already a default thing that's happening in this community. If I stop doing that, you might not like using the word action, but that is fundamentally an act. A boycott is an act. So as far as things that are institutionalized, you can refrain, and that is a really powerful action because those kinds of actions can spread like crazy. I mean, the idea that there's a particular collection of people that otherwise, without knowing it, we're just giving our money to, if they're exploiting other humans, if they're making life harder on the earth, we don't have to keep giving them money. That is a huge act. It's a huge gesture, and it's imitatable. And that makes it profoundly powerful.
You could also institute a system of government and economics that doesn't require on profits. I mean, you could have something that's focused on happiness or the fact that people get fed. I mean, that's kind of revolutionary. I'm just saying, like, if you really, if you want an answer, you could revolt.
I mean, it hasn't happened so far.
And it won't right now in our society. Like, I mean, we saw the Arab Spring this year. People were unhappy and they did something, and I'm not like so sure how much Western influences played into some areas like Tanzania and stuff. I know like we have influenced them through globalization, like I was talking before, but it's a matter of, I think, talking about it. Like he was saying, like if you think about this movement, like the Wall Street movement, like just because this happened and it started to get media coverage with the Brooklyn Bridge thing, the Wall Street corruption in the media, like I think The Economist, I'm not sure who did the report, but it's now being mentioned like way more than it ever was before, and we're like finally opening up our eyes to it, and like people are seeing it broadcast every day, even like on people who don't support it, Fox News and stuff, and like these thoughts are now like the seeds planted, and people are now thinking about these things, and that, I think the thought leads to change,
Maybe. I mean, have there been times before with similar groups?
I mean, the Tea Party became huge, and they were at the base of their, when they started, their whole thing was about fiscal responsibility. And since then, look at the legislation that's been going on. This year we had a fight in Washington, D.C. over, are we going to expand the ceiling for the debt, or are we going to be fiscally responsible? And that became an issue that became huge. We dropped our credit rating as a country over that whole situation, and that's a step towards what the Tea Party was talking about. So, I mean, obviously they've made strides.
I mean, they caused the discussion, as you said. What was the result of that or something? I mean, what came of it?
What came of it?
Right.
We have legislators now that won't pass bills just because they're not fiscally responsible. They don't want to spend more. I mean, that's happening right now,
Okay.
Like, I'm not saying I agree with the Tea Party, but they did have an impact,
It's already happened. There's been impacts. I mean, we talked about the banks dropping fees on their credit cards and stuff. That's
that's probably a result of stuff that's been happening recently with people like Occupy. You know, the whole civil rights movement, that was a minority, and just because they got together and made themselves very visible, it made legislation happen. So, just because, it doesn't seem there's a direct link between making your voice known, like getting out there where people can see and telling other people about it. I think there are probably people out there that are educated about this and can tell you that just being out there and being present is going to influence the local politics or national politics, global politics.
I mean, hopefully, but I just like to see some way if it's affecting things now. I mean, do we have a way of telling?
Everybody knows about it. It's raising
True,
awareness.
but as we said, everyone knowing about it, there's probably people who might be able to tell you that's making a change. And there are kind of similar groups where it might have worked before. How do we tell if it's working? What do we do and how do we tell if it's working? Those are the real questions. I mean, I love to talk about philosophy and ethics, but what do we do? How do we tell if it's working is the real question.
I think we know it's like this particular movement. I personally, in our generation, I have not seen these many cities come together for one specific cause. And like,
I got another one.
so and like you're talking about the Arab Spring and the uprising there. Like there's movements in Europe. There's movements everywhere. I think the first thing, like, we don't know if we're getting ground yet, but there's definitely awareness was the first step for making any change. And this is an international movement that is creating at least awareness. At least we still don't know. It's still young enough, but we don't know what the outcomes are going to be.
Yeah, it's very young. But there are also other things like the credit card fees being dropped, but also, hanging out with Occupy people, they've received letters from political candidates saying, what would you like for me to propose in a bill? A bill hasn't been changed. That would be a definite way to see something where, all right, we're not cutting any more spending for the, education or something like that. But, that stuff's happening. Definitely is happening.
We'll see the implications. Through politics in the future. We're coming up on election years where people are going to go out and vote, and we're going to see the Occupy initiatives are being transferred out into election results.
There have been politicians up at the Capitol too, shaking hands. There will be a chance to talk to them if, you can write a letter or you can talk to a person face to face.
Right.
That might change something.
I'm kind of confused as to what the initiatives of this movement are exactly, because I don't know, it's kind of blurry.
I think that's one big criticism of the movement, and I'm not gonna say that I totally disagree with it. I'm not really affiliated with the movement as far as I'm aware of it, because I find it interesting to see something happening in our time, and I've done a lot of research. I read a lot of media, I go to the media a lot for this particular movement, and I found that it's not organized, but there are broad issues that are being politics, we have the corrupt system, not a corrupt system, it's not corrupt, I'm sorry. We have a system that doesn't work. It's being limited by
monetary influence. There's wealth inequality in the U.S. and that's influencing politics, and the lower people are being left out of it. I think that's probably the unifying theme across all the Occupy movements. There are a lot of things that trickle down, like this corruption and the fact that the people that are very wealthy can control things. They can control media, they can control action, they can control legislation, executive measures. Those facts trickle down into a lot of other things that a lot of people are complaining about, but I think the unifying themes are the unequal wealth and how that's being used to control politics. The Occupy Tallahassee movement is adopting grievances from the people that you can submit online or at All Saints Cafe. They've already adopted the Occupy Wall Street grievances, and they're making their own grievances, and they discuss those at the General Assemblies at 1 o'clock at the Capitol lawn. Those grievances will at some point turn into demands that we hope will be actionable, that politicians can vote for, or that people can protest for, or anything along those lines.
Are you proposing a more socialized system?
No,
That's what we're trying to find out. What do they want?
I don't have that much knowledge on local.
I think you'd say that you feel that we live in a system that encourages the sorts of behavior that you disagree with.
Basically. Capitalism.
Capitalism.
What you disagree with specifically, I think the Occupy movement is more of a way to get people heard, not so much of a we have point, more of we are creating a forum in which you will hear everyone's concerns as opposed to just having it washed to the sideline.
I agree with that completely.
By people being able to say, well, you could listen to them, or you could listen to me.
Right.
With the Occupy movement, it's just people getting fed up with that system of ideal exchange. You could ignore me because he pays you more to ignore me, but you can't ignore all of us.
Yeah.
You can ignore a person. You can't ignore people when they get up and they stand there and they show that they're pissed or that they don't agree with whatever's going on. Now, what they don't agree with, there are a lot of people that disagree on lots of things, but they're heard through the movement, which is the importance and the strength behind. There is no leader of the Occupy movement. It's just the people. That is the big deal.
Right.
That is why it's so.
They were talking about that earlier on this afternoon when people first started coming out here.
It's also a curse.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons to do that. Yeah, it causes some problems, but also it keeps people from oversimplifying this movement, from being like, oh, these are one. I mean, they try to simplify it anyway. They're hippies, they're jobless.
I think it's more of a strength than a
right. Yeah.
So you criticize it
I think
saying
we are
it's
viewing
kinda
it as a strength,
wishy-washy,
but if you don't keep it simple, then there's no simple way to combat it. And I think a lot of people haven't found, like, people are really afraid and curious and don't know how to combat this because there's no one simple thing that they can fight, no one simple thing they can throw money at, no one simple thing they can, adopt as a plank in their platform. So I think that's kind of why that is. We're trying to prevent, just like you said, trying to prevent people from like turning this into something that's simple and defeatable or co-optable.
Right.
Something of the people is what we're going for.
You can placate a person. There's no way to say, oh,
And my suspicion, personally, if I'm just going to say my own point of view, is that there'll be a lot of people trying to speak to the Occupy crowd and the crowd that it represents, because theoretically it's a 99% crowd of the population.
Yeah, I think that's already happened. But
right.
Like you said, like shaking hands and everything out there.
Yeah, I saw I mean, again, it's a satirical show. I watched Stephen Colbert go and talk about the Occupy movement a few days ago, and he was satire, but what I noticed mostly is like they address major points like who tell, like anybody who says like I'm with the Occupy movement, I can't speak for everyone. I can speak for myself. So that you can't be like, well, you're the leader. What do you want? It's like, well, I am talking for myself, and everyone else helps me talk for myself. I help them talk for themselves. It's not.
It's good and bad.
Sure, it comes with some cons, but it's. I don't know. It's the pros outweigh the cons. By having a mass movement like this, you can't just ignore it. And yes, you may be able to say, "Oh, he's just complaining about crap," but
it only lasts so long.
You can't silence me. Saying that I'm still complaining about something that I think is wrong, which is the important thing.
What are you saying about regulating?
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say there?
I mean, can't this work against you though? I mean, since there isn't one or few core. I mean, well, you said there was one, but there isn't like a proposed solution necessarily, or at least several, that politicians can adopt into their policy. So, is this like what's the point, or like what? Does that make sense?
Yes. What are the actions?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. I don't think that this movement, at least not yet, is supposed to come forward and say we want this to happen, because there's too many individual things to talk about.
Right.
The important thing is that by me showing, it's showing everyone who can make decisions that first. It starts at. Well, sorry, let me collect my thought a little bit.
I mean, that's the same thing as saying enlightened self-interest. It's an ideal.
Sure, but I
it's
can
not
step
a solution.
forward and argue, and then by arguing that something is wrong, I can make you think about it. I can convince you that something is wrong.
We're all here today.
That's the idea, though, because then it's not saying fix it like this. People can say, well, no, that's not the right way to do it.
That'd be great. We could have a real discussion.
What I want you, what it's supposed to do is say, okay, let's come together and discuss what is wrong.
But
And then we
from
can
that,
think of an answer.
You have to derive an actual answer at some point. You can't just say
Right, we can't just sit here and
wrong,
argue
this is
indefinitely
good,
saying which one's the best option.
ethics, humanity, exploitation, corruption. You have to say these are policies which need to be changed. These are policies that don't exist yet.
But if we didn't do anything, nothing would change.
Right. This is the first step. Awareness
Exactly.
is a step towards an answer.
Like if
It's
you
not an end.
think about the past 20 years, Americans have been happy, like with how things are. I mean, the economy was great for a while. We were having like steady growth in GDP. Technology was moving things on.
Although if you look at the graph, all that wealth has gone to the top percent.
Yeah, at the top percent.
Just gonna throw that in there.
But like the middle class Americans were we're reaping some of the benefits in a sense, and then now all of a sudden this financial crisis happens, and we have a lag after the recession where things aren't going the way we want. We're used to going up, and we're just kind of stagnant right now.
Yeah,
so
it was happening before the recession.
Back
too.
up.
Just gonna throw that one in there. The mean or the average wages of the unless you've been in like the top 20%, your wages have not gone anywhere since like the 50s or the 70s. Like maybe a couple percent. Like your real wage has not gone anywhere.
Yeah, and
Just gonna throw that one
yeah,
out there.
like I completely agree with you.
Not to dilute the point.
But like it's finally like we just realized that things really do suck right now, and we have to like stand up and like I'm really happy that like my generation and the people that are involved, like and all the cohorts that are involved in the movement, that they're finally voicing their opinions, because before no one really in the past 20 years that I've seen, there hasn't been movements like the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street that have come out and been like grassroots movements, just normal people coming up and saying, this is wrong, let's change it, and I think it's about time that this is happening. I think that like the broader aspect of it all is we're finally having a voice, and normal people are finally standing up for what they believe in. So
And you do see this in places. You've seen, it's not really in a whole, well, in some places there is financial interest, but, there are companies that have adopted, green practices, and that's just because there's popular concern. People stop buying certain companies' stuff. Like Walmart's had big issues with people not buying their stuff because they're all about profit and not about people. And we haven't really talked about that, specifically in this context, but their profits have hurt from that, and they've done a lot of PR to try and address these things. So these things are happening as we speak, and having our voices heard is having an impact.
I've got a question. You guys that want to change things, are you guys gonna vote in 2012?
Absolutely.
Because that's not at all. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Maybe even write letters.
Yeah.
Let them.
You can go out and march and get arrested all you want, but you're not going to change anything unless you vote. The reason why the Tea Party's been successful is they voted last election,
and they got their friends to go vote with them too.
Yeah, they actually voted, and what was it, 30% turnout in 2010? Come on. Even 2008 was a low turnout.
Well, the American left traditionally gets murdered in midterm elections anyways. That's usually what happens. They're just not coordinated at all.
Yeah, but still, you can do if we had voted in the last election, maybe we would have had this whole, we can't raise the debt ceiling thing.
Yeah.
Is everybody registered?
Curious as to what
ready to go? You know who you're going to vote for? Done your homework?
Herman Cain, baby. 999. An outlaw sodomy.
I have another issue that I've been kind of thinking about
with a giant electrified fence.
God, Herman Cain.
With globalization and all we were talking about, the sectors that I think jobs have been the main issue in this in the political conversation lately, and I think one thing that Americans aren't really focusing on is the fact that we need new sectors within our industrial system. We need to focus on renewable energies and new technology, because America's been the leader in a lot of things for the past
except social change.
Except social change in the past few centuries. But we created the cars, we all the iPad, Apple, American corporations have developed the new technologies. Now we in order to stay ahead in the world and have our hegemonic authority and keep where we want to stay, which we don't necessarily need to be, but we need to create new sectors, that industry that can really provide new technologies that can be competitive in the future and make us stay on top and have this great system where our GDP is very high per capita. But that's we're not really pushing. I mean, Barack Obama talks about it a lot, renewable energies and stuff, but there's really no legislation that's having a giant impact. So
there is legislation that's are we going to drill at home? Are we going to drill abroad? Are we going to elect leaders that send troops overseas? These are all things that we can find who is supporting these things and vote for them or not vote for them accordingly.
You need to stop for it.
I'm going to vote for Herman Cain. It'll be hilarious.
I don't know, honestly. I think what a politician says
they're
going to do and actually confronted with when they get into office, particularly executive politicians.
I don't know. I haven't really gone because
Obama's foreign
school
policy,
problems, but I mean, I can find time.
Let's go out there for a little bit and see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, have you guys had a good show? I haven't even drove by it. Have you?
I mean, yes. The first weekend we had 200, 300 people show up.
You can't make Reagan's
and then the second weekend, it trickled down a little bit because what's going to happen. There was probably less than 100 people in third grade.
Yeah.
There's probably about 7
I mean, it's also like kind of like a little bit of like the energy that it did have within the media. I mean, like MSNBC had like they were talking about their finances today, like in the news, like it was like the top story, like about the $500,000 that they made, and like where it's going, and like how the one bank that they were in, like I read up on it like all the time because I'm like super interested, and I'm just like interested in more
you don't have to like
so
actually
into the
filibuster
movement
anymore. You just
and
like, hey, I want to
the
filibuster.
organization and like